Welcome to the Green Podcast. My name is Dylan Welch. I'm the CEO of green.org and Dylan Welch Media. Our goal with this podcast is to bring you the biggest names and leaders in renewable energy, clean technology, and sustainability so that you can stay up to date with the latest trends and everything that is happening in this world. Not only that, you'll get some action items for your life so that you can apply some amazing things and make your world a better place as well. Let's get the show started. We're going to bring our next speaker right on. We have our next speaker coming up, Josef Mouris, who's the founder and CEO of Electron Aerospace and Electron Aviation. So give us a second here, and we're going to get Josef on as our next speaker here. Let's see if we can get Josef here. He's tuning in. All right, there we go.
Okay.
Hey, Josef, how's it going?
Hi, Dylan. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Fantastic. I had a bit of a problem with the internet, but I think we're all good now. So fingers crossed, touch wood.
Yeah, it looks good. Sounds good. It happens every time, right? No matter how many times we've done Zoom and Google Meet. So Josef, I appreciate you being here. Nadav actually kind of talked about a little bit about some things you're working on. So I'm excited to kind of hear your perspective and share what's happening in the aviation and aerospace industry. So here, take it away whenever you're ready.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's a nice lead in into what we're doing at Electron. And if I may, I'd like to share a couple of slides with you while we go through this. And then let me start by telling you a little bit more about myself as well. So is that working for you now, Dylan? Everybody else?
Yep. Yeah, you're good to go. We can see your screen.
Fantastic. Okay. So I am one of the co-founders of Electron. I'm actually the CEO as well. But to just tell you a bit about where I come from, actually, I used to be an airline pilot for 15 years, which is obviously, as mentioned before, one of the most hard to abate industries that we currently have. And having flown regional aircraft for 15 years, it was actually Europe's leading or biggest regional airline at the time, Flybe. I'm quite used to doing flights of an hour to an hour and a half, 2 hours, flying 80 to 120 people around, flying from London to Amsterdam and to Paris and places like that. And also, in my spare time, I'm a glider pilot, and I fly model airplanes at world level. I'm actually the number 2 in the world with a particular class. I've been doing the numbers for quite a few years and thinking, why isn't much more being done about these short flights? Because yes, okay, we can't do long haul, but we can do the shorter distance flights, and we should do that because actually that is also a significant part of the emissions. But to make this possible, I needed somebody who filled in the gaps in my capabilities, and luckily I found Mark Henry de Jong to fill those gaps with his quite interesting background of all the things that he's done. So, and what is this thing that I have in my head? Well, it's this short haul travel, right? So here's an example of, I live currently in Southampton in the UK, but my family lives near Apeldoorn in the Netherlands. And this will cost you 8 to 10 hours to drive, and you still have to get on a boat, or you can fly with a commercial airline at the time that the airline dictates, which is actually only once a day from Southampton, and you end up at Schiphol, Amsterdam, which is the other side of the country in the Netherlands. That's not actually where you need to go. And yeah, there must be a better solution out there. In fact, there is. It is time consuming to travel. It's expensive to travel. And it's polluting, flying, but every mode of transport has some sort of emissions. Now, there is an alternative. If you wanted to reduce that travel time by half, you could fly private, but this will come at great expense and also produces even more emissions, right? So that's definitely not the solution that we all want. Especially me having 2 kids now of 6 and 7, it sort of drives it home a bit more what the reality is of the future that my children will have in the future. So I chose to be part of an industry that's looking forward and zero emissions, rather than continuing to fly as an airline pilot and producing a bunch of emissions. So the solution that we're working on at Electron is we start small, like aviation started 100 years ago with small aircraft, and we're still able to actually cut that journey time in half but we do it now with 94% lower cost than flying private, and we do it with practically zero emissions. So it's zero direct emissions, but there is obviously emissions in manufacturing a vehicle, and the energy has to come from somewhere. So our mission then is to actually unlock zero emission travel for all. And with for all, we mean we want to bring this flying private down to a price point where everybody can afford it. I mean, I think the 94% already gets you excited, but this isn't supposed to just be for the rich and famous. This is supposed to be for everyone. And we actually already have the infrastructure there as well, which is really important. I mean, right now you can fly between the big airports a few times a day, but the majority of the airports out there are actually underserviced right now. In Europe, 88% of the passengers travel through only 1% of the airports. And actually being able to fly from Southampton Airport to an airport near where my parents are in the Netherlands, which is Teuge Airport, it's only a little airport, would actually slash my journey time down half to 3 to 4 hours door to door. Why now? And I think this is a very important point, because unfortunately emissions is something that we need to sort out, but it won't happen if the economics aren't right. So physically it's possible to do it now because energy density of batteries has improved by over 200% in the last 10 years, but also the cost of batteries have come down by 90% over that period and are continuing to go down again. And on the other side, you have this carrot and stick. The carbon taxes come in that actually airlines now have to start paying for their emissions, like every other industry. And this is actually coming into force next year in Europe already, where now airlines have to pay for all their emissions, even if just a tiny part of the flight is inside Europe. And the cost of those emissions has gone up from €8 per ton of CO2 to over 90 euros per ton of CO2. And the true cost is somewhere around 750 euros. So it's going to go up even more. As far as the market, and I think this is very important to realize, there's a good report out there from McKinsey that says that regional air mobility is going to grow massively in the next 12 years. But where are those passengers, customers actually coming from? Well, the large majority of them are actually coming out of a car. And I just wanted to share a little bit more insight on this here, on this talk, because it's very important to realize we have 1.5 billion cars out there in the world, right? So even if we're producing 5 to 10 million cars a year at the moment, EVs, it's going to take a long time to replace them all. There's still going to be, half of the fleet is probably still going to be combustion engines by 2050 at this rate. Whereas actually aviation, because you have a much higher utilization rate, your car is parked up 95% of the time, you can actually do a lot more trips with one aircraft than you can do with a car. So we actually see a lot of our passengers coming from ground conversion, and that's a really good thing, because it actually means that we're leaving those combustion engine cars and not producing emissions with those. Where we see the market in terms of there's various projects out there, how does it make sense to build yet another aircraft? Well, yes, it does, because actually there has been a lot of hype recently in the eVTOL sector, or what's also called urban air mobility, which will get you from one side of the city to the other, or from the airport to where you want to be in a big city, if there is somewhere to land. But it won't get you from London to Amsterdam. It won't get you from big city to big city. Then you have some really big aircraft being developed, which is more replacing of what the current aviation is doing, commercial aviation's airlines. But those aircraft won't be able to fly into those small airports. They're too big for that. They're going to take a long time to develop, and they also cost a lot to develop. So we basically sit in this bubble here, which is below 5 seats, because if you are going to have more like an Uber type service, where you order your ride, you don't need a bus for a handful of people. And the statistics say that actually on private jets, on average, you only have 1.2 people on board. And also in a car in Europe and in the US, you on average only have like 1.6 or 1.8 people on board. So you don't really need such a big aircraft, but you do need to be able to do sufficient range to actually connect those destinations. So our aircraft does that. and it hits all the operating requirements. And we've realized that actually there is going to be a massive demand, more than actually that we can cater for. I mean, we haven't even got the aircraft ready right now, and already demand is outstripping supply massively. And it's going to be like with Tesla. In fact, I'll come to that in just a second. It's going to come down to the point that there is going to be more demand than you can handle, and it's a scaling up issue. And we can connect all these kind of destinations with these aircraft because we have a much higher energy efficiency. It's actually better than driving in an electric car, and a lot better than the eVTOLs that are currently already well known out in the public. And as I mentioned, we have a much higher utilization rate in terms of how many kilometers or passenger kilometers can you actually deliver with such a vehicle over its 15-year lifespan. That means that the emissions, right now the choice, if you buy an electric car, well, there's a bit more emissions involved in actually producing that car, but then you produce zero emissions driving it. If you take into account that it's zero emissions electricity, then eventually you actually beat a combustion engine car. Well, with an aircraft, the amount of emissions attributed to the manufacturing of that vehicle is a fraction of that of a car. And the reason that we're starting high end also is because, just like Tesla, they started with a Roadster. You start with a higher price point because it is difficult to manufacture anything at scale. The price point is going to be a little bit higher initially until you get a bit more volume. And so you really need to find an entry point into the market where there is customers actually willing to pay that higher price that you have at the start. But in the end, just like with Tesla, we will bring the cost down and down and down until eventually everybody can afford it. Another good reason to start with a smaller airplane is the amount of money that you need to actually get into the market to develop that aircraft, to get it certified, which is much higher for bigger aircraft than it is for a smaller aircraft. And then in terms of what does that mean for emissions? So globally, short haul is anything up to 1,500 kilometers. By 2032, we can actually already do up to 800 kilometers, which is a significant amount in terms of gigatons worth of emissions. And by 2050, we can actually do 32% of global aviation emissions with our types of planes, but there will also be bigger planes that follow. It's more in terms of the range that you can actually do with battery electric. And cutting a third of the emissions of global aviation emissions is obviously well worth doing. In terms of unit economics, so our aircraft price at the moment is actually 1.5 million. That will go up over time, but that's actually on par with combustion engine planes of that size out there in the market today. And on the passenger side, in terms of customers paying to use the service, well, we're going to start already 25% below what the current price is that those operators charge. And by 2030, we will bring that down to less than half of that price. We actually have already quite a few kilometers sold through our logistics partner, and we actually also have quite a few options for aircraft sold so far. So as I mentioned, there is more demand than there is supply. And macro level, and this is what gets me really excited. So we've seen this in automotive with Tesla. We've seen it with Uber. There is usually one player that comes along and becomes market leader in this space, in this void, effectively, that there is. And Tesla is worth more than in the next 10 automotive manufacturers combined now. And a similar thing will probably happen in aerospace, where there will be one manufacturer that is actually worth more than all the current aerospace manufacturers involved, because they find it so hard to pivot their business. So my kind of words of wisdom that I wanted to say to you, like, yes, hardware is hard. It's a long road. Some people call us. I've said that we're a masochist, and it's not SaaS. It takes a long time to get into the market. It takes a lot of money to do so. But in the end, who is going to be reaping the benefits from this is actually the operators and the aircraft manufacturers that are able to scale this up, because it's going to be a big market. in the end, you won't be able to fly economically with a combustion engine aircraft anymore regionally. You will have to do that with a battery electric aircraft because it will be cheaper. Whereas long haul flying is going to become a lot more expensive, and there you can then use sustainable aviation fuels to do that, but it will be at a much higher price point than where we are today. I also wanted to mention that these aircraft are only going to be made and brought into the market if you have an experienced engineering team to actually develop the aircraft. So there's a lot of projects out there with a lot of hype, but also it's a very serious business, aerospace, in terms of certifying, and actually getting an aircraft through certification is a massive task, and you need an experienced team to do that. And I'm really happy to report that we have a very experienced team with a minimum of 15 years experience in each team member, some actually as much as 30 years in the aerospace industry. So this is basically an aircraft to give you a bit of an idea of what we're replacing in the market today. This is what we're starting with. This is the benchmark aircraft in the space that we are in. But also think about the customer service that those aircraft offer you today. This is all right for a private aircraft service or private owner perhaps, but for everyday people getting into this aircraft, climbing up on top of the wing and then climbing down again into the cabin is not the customer experience that you currently have if you fly with an Airbus or a Boeing with an airline. So that needs to change, and that's something that we are addressing with our aircraft as well. And also we are able to transport cargo with our aircraft as well, which is important because cargo actually allows you to use the aircraft at night as well, which allows you to lower the operating cost for both the cargo customers and the passenger customers at the same time. So having a multi-use aircraft that can be used for multi-use cases really, again, brings down the cost for everybody, which makes this more accessible. And lastly, I wanted to just say that the products in the future that are really going to make it to become adopted by a mass market of people are also going to need to look nice. There needs to be a really good customer experience traveling with these aircraft. Just like right now, a lot of people like their Teslas, a lot of people like their iPads and their iPhones because they're very intuitive to use. Basically, you've reduced everything that's not necessary in there and removed it to bring the cost down and make it look good. And these designs will stand the test of time. So you need to look at us not as a technology development company, but actually a product development company and a product design company. And to that reason, we have also hired a very experienced designer who comes from the automotive industry to actually help us design an aircraft that the experience is more like getting into your car today, into a modern electric car. And so we have also now already the second generation of the cabin mock-up that people can view. There is a lot of progress behind the scenes. Unfortunately, I can't share that with you today because that's subject to NDA. But to give you a bit of an idea, this really exists. You can touch it, feel it, come sit in it. And please do reach out if you would like to learn more about what we do at Electron. We think we're working on a very pragmatic solution to start the transition of the sustainability towards sustainability in aviation. And I really encourage you to take us seriously and to get in touch if you want to know more. And I'm very grateful for Dylan for the opportunity just to tell you a little bit more about what we do. And we also are very supportive of other companies working on sustainable solutions for the future. If there's any questions, Dylan, that you'd like to ask, I think we've got maybe a minute or so left.
Yeah, well, first off, that's amazing and appreciate what you're doing. I imagine it's pretty hard to kind of develop and build these planes, with this ambitious goal. What was sort of your first transition from being an airline pilot to, hey, I want to develop this new electric plane and solve this problem? Like, how did it go from sort of this idea to where you are today?
So first of all, we didn't wake up and wanted to become an aircraft manufacturer. In fact, it's actually the service, being able to just use this as a customer, that got us excited. And we just realized that we couldn't buy the planes. There is one or two now battery electric aircraft certified in Europe. Europe is leading the way in that respect, but it's a two-seater aircraft with no room for luggage that can't fly very far. So it's still very much the early days, that pioneering time like we had 100 years ago in aviation. So by default, we've had to become an aircraft manufacturer. And what gave me kind of the confidence to say, actually, you can do this is really strange, but actually it was during COVID. And so that was the time that everybody was sitting at home and kind of reflecting on what they're doing with their lives. And aviation also ground down to a halt. And I ended up actually making a lot of PPE for my wife, who works in the health service, and realized how much you can actually achieve in a very short space of time with a handful of people, when you really need to get stuff done. So we actually made over 100,000 face shields for health service in only a couple of weeks' time, which was just incredible. And so finding these kind of people that share that same drive and just want to make shit happen, it was amazing and transformative. And that's really what made me think, well, let's just go and do it.
Yeah, and so kind of our last question here: how can we support you in terms of financials or just in general? Like, what can we do to help you?
Yeah, so we have a long list of investors and suppliers and partners, and so our philosophy is we focus on the airframe itself. We buy all the components that go into that aircraft. We want to work with anybody that's really putting the pedal to the metal to make this whole thing happen, this whole ecosystem happen. So from charging infrastructure to passenger services to tokenization to you name it. If you think that there is somebody out there that we should talk to, please just connect us, because we're always happy to go for a chat. And yeah, that also comes down to the financing side. It is a capital intensive business. So if there is investors out there that aren't afraid of hardware, and can see the light to actually to invest in a hardware intensive business, then please make that connection.
Of course. And to anyone listening, tuning in, hopefully you can do the same. And Josef, we'll share your website and LinkedIn as well with everybody. So Josef, thanks for tuning in, or not tuning in, speaking here today. I really appreciate taking some time out of your day. Hopefully next year, we'll be able to see the inside of the cabin, and then maybe a year or two after that, people will be able to fly in on the Electron from around Europe to the next London Green Summit and to other similar events.
That's the goal. That's the goal. Yeah, I had my train tickets already booked to come to London. So it'd be nice to meet you face to face next time.
Absolutely, that's the goal. Maybe you can take us out. Yeah, maybe you can take us out for a spin next time.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
all right.
Thank you, Josef, so much. Thank you so much for tuning into the episode. My name is Dylan Welch. Appreciate it. As always, stay up to date with the latest information on green.org and dylanwelch.com. Dylan Welch Media is a full-service media and communications agency dedicated to promoting, marketing, and helping businesses in clean tech, renewable energy, and sustainability grow, get more clients, get more customers, get in front of their ideal clientele. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. If you're interested in joining the Green Summit, go to www.green-summit.org. Reserve your ticket today. There's very few spots left, so make sure you get on that ASAP. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.